Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when one of comedy's sharpest voices goes head-to-head with one of daytime TV's boldest personalities? That's exactly what unfolded when Ricky Gervais has joined The View. The topic on the table? Have comedy boundaries gone too far? From the moment Ricky walked on stage with his signature smirk, the audience knew something unforgettable was about to happen. He wasted no time poking fun at cancel culture, declaring, if people can't take a joke, maybe the problem isn't comedy, maybe it's them. The crowd erupted in laughter, but Joy Behar wasn't laughing for long. Ricky, there's a difference between telling jokes and punching down, she shot back, her tone sharp but measured. The air crackled as Ricky leaned in, grinning. Joy, the only thing I punch down on is my treadmill. The audience howled, half shocked, half delighted. What followed was one of the most outrageous, laugh-out-loud, and unexpectedly heated debates daytime TV has ever seen. A clash of wit, ego, and raw honesty that left the audience gasping, cheering, and sometimes squirming in their seats.
The stage lights dimmed for a moment as Ricky Gervais walked out, waving casually to the cheering audience. His grin stretched ear to ear, the kind of mischievous smile that promised trouble. He plopped down at the table beside Joy, immediately leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. "Welcome, Ricky," Whoopi said warmly, though with a knowing glance that hinted she was bracing for impact. "We're talking today about comedy and whether boundaries have gone too far." Ricky raised his eyebrows, almost feigning surprise. "Boundaries? Oh, I didn't know there were any left. I thought people just got mad on Twitter for sport." The audience burst into laughter. Joy smirked, shaking her head. "Oh, come on, Ricky, don't play dumb. You know full well people get offended when jokes cross certain lines. You can't just hide behind, 'it's comedy,' every time you upset someone." Ricky leaned forward, chuckling. "Joy, upsetting people is my job. If everyone's laughing, I'm not doing comedy, I'm babysitting." The crowd roared, half with laughter, half with nervous gasps. Sunny Hostin raised her eyebrows, clearly amused, but wary of where this was headed. Joy didn't miss a beat. "See, that's the problem. You think comedy has to offend, but sometimes it's just lazy. Cheap laughs at other people's expense. That's not edgy, that's punching down." Ricky tilted his head, savoring the moment. "Punching down? Joy, I don't even bend down to tie my shoes anymore, let alone punch. If someone laughs, the joke works. If they don't, I bomb. That's comedy. It's not a moral sermon." The audience applauded, some whistling. Joy raised a finger in rebuttal. "No, comedy isn't a sermon, but it does have responsibility. Words matter, and when you normalize cruelty in a joke, it spreads. Don't tell me you haven't thought about that." Ricky spread his arms wide, his grin unfiltering. "Of course I've thought about it. And then I thought, oh well, if I start tailoring my comedy to avoid offending anyone, I'll be standing on stage in silence. Actually, that's not true. Someone would still be offended by my silence." Laughter rippled through the crowd, even from Whoopi, but Joy's smile hardened. "That's the easy way out. You don't want to adapt, so you call everyone else too sensitive. But culture changes. People grow. You can't just be stuck in the 90s telling the same edgy jokes and calling it bravery." Ricky's smirk turned sly. "Joy, you've been telling the same political jokes since the Clinton administration. No one's canceled you yet." The audience gasped, then erupted in laughter, some even standing. Joy's eyes widened, then narrowed, and she leaned toward him, pointing a finger. "That's the difference, Ricky. I punch up, at the powerful, at politicians, at the people in charge. You sometimes aim your fire at the vulnerable." Ricky's voice dropped lower, more serious now, though the twinkle never left his eyes. "You think audiences can't tell the difference? You think they're too stupid to know if I'm mocking a politician or poking fun at human nature? That's patronizing. People are smarter than you give them credit for." The audience clapped, torn between admiration and unease. Joy crossed her arms. "Or maybe people are tired of comedians acting like martyrs just because someone boos them. No one's taking away your microphone, Ricky. We're just saying, maybe use it more responsibly." Ricky leaned back in his chair, grinning wider. "Responsibly? I'm not driving a bus, Joy. I'm telling jokes. If you want responsible, watch the news. If you want dangerous, uncomfortable laughter, you come to me." The audience cheered again, louder this time, as the sparks between Ricky and Joy crackled visibly across the table. What began as banter was now edging into something hotter, sharper, and impossible to ignore.
The tension that had been simmering between Ricky and Joy finally boiled into something heavier. The audience could feel it, leaning forward in their seats, unsure whether to laugh or brace themselves for a verbal fistfight. Whoopi tried to play referee. Okay, let's all breathe a little. It's comedy, it's politics, it's life. Maybe there's some middle ground? But Ricky wasn't ready to soften. He tilted his head toward Joy, still grinning like a cat that had cornered a mouse. Joy doesn't believe in middle ground. She wants guardrails on comedy, a speed limit, a seatbelt, and an airbag. I'd rather crash spectacularly and let the audience decide if I survive. The crowd burst into laughter, but Joy leaned in, her eyes sharp. "You call it a crash, Ricky. I call it recklessness. You don't just survive. People walk away hurt. Words stick. When a young kid hears a joke at their expense, it doesn't feel like harmless fun. It cuts." The room grew quieter. Ricky tapped the table with his finger. "Then don't blame me, blame the bully who repeats the joke. You can't police ideas at the source. Comedy is a mirror. If you don't like the reflection, don't break the mirror, change the world it reflects." That line drew a wave of applause, but Joy wasn't giving ground. Easy to say when you're not the one getting mocked. You've made millions off saying whatever you like. But there are people who can't walk away, people who live every day being the punchline. That's the part you don't get. Ricky's smile faltered for the first time, replaced with something sharper. "No, I do get it. I grew up working class. I've been the butt of jokes. I know what it's like to be laughed at. That's why I learned to laugh first and louder. Comedy is how you take power back, not how you lose it." A murmur swept the audience. Sunny Hostin jumped in, trying to mediate. "But Ricky, there's a difference between laughing at yourself and encouraging others to laugh at someone else's pain. Don't you think that line matters?" Ricky turned to her, nodding politely. "It does matter, but it's not always clear where the line is. That's the beauty of it, the risk. Every joke is a gamble. Some land, some fail. But the alternative? Silence. And silence is boring." The audience clapped again, though less unanimously this time. Some were with him, others clearly uneasy. Joy seized the moment. Silence isn't the alternative. Growth is. You can be funny without being cruel. Look at comedians who have adapted. They still make people laugh without dragging them through the mud. Ricky chuckled, shaking his head. "Adapted? You mean neutered. Comedy that tiptoes around feelings isn't comedy. It's customer service. Hello, did you enjoy your safe little joke? Can I upsell you a chuckle? No thanks." That jab sent the audience howling, but Joy cut through it, her voice firm. "That's your problem, Ricky. You mistake empathy for weakness. But comedy with empathy isn't customer service. It's craft. It's smarter. It takes more skill to make people laugh without punching them in the gut." Ricky sat up straighter, eyes flashing. "And you mistake discomfort for cruelty. Making people uncomfortable is the whole point. Comedy isn't supposed to tuck you in at night. It's supposed to wake you up." The audience clapped, some even cheering, but Joy leaned in, lowering her voice just enough for the sting to cut deeper. Or maybe it's supposed to make people laugh, and you've confused cruelty with bravery because it's easier than evolving." The crowd gasped. Ricky's grin froze, and for a beat, the air hung heavy with the weight of the words. Whoopi raised her hand, sensing things spiraling. All right, let's not go to war here. You're both making points people care about, but we can't ignore that comedy does land differently depending on who's hearing it." But neither Ricky nor Joy were pulling back now. Ricky turned, his voice sharper. "You call it evolving, I call it sanitizing. If you want to live in a padded world where no one ever feels a sting, fine, but don't drag comedy into it. Comedy is the last place where truth gets told without apology." And Joy's tone matched his, unwavering. "And I'm saying truth without compassion isn't truth. It's arrogance dressed as honesty." The audience erupted into divided applause, some on their feet, others shaking their heads. The sparks weren't just flying anymore. They were flames licking at the edge of civility. What began as witty sparring had turned into a full-on battle of principles, and no one on stage could pretend it was just a light-hearted chat anymore.
The air inside the studio felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath at once. What had started as banter had become raw, and the audience could feel it in their bones. Even Whoopi looked uneasy, glancing from Ricky to Joy like a parent watching two children teeter on the edge of a fight they couldn't stop. Joy leaned forward, her eyes locked on Ricky. Her voice softened, but the softness made it sharper. "You think this is about your freedom to tell jokes? It isn't. It's about the real people sitting at home, people who've worked their whole lives just to survive, who get mocked because of their accent, their looks, their struggles. You call it comedy, but to them, it feels like humiliation." The audience gave a quiet murmur of agreement. Ricky tilted his head, as though measuring her words, then shook it with a half-smile. "Humiliation. Life humiliates you long before a comedian ever gets the chance. Bills humiliate you. Illness humiliates you. Losing someone humiliates you. I don't add to that pain. I shine a light on it. And when people laugh at it, it's not cruelty, it's release." But Joy wasn't letting them off easy. She straightened her notes, her voice steady, deliberate. "I'll tell you something, Ricky. When I was younger, my family didn't have much. My father worked 3 jobs. My mother stretched $1 until it screamed. When comics made fun of people like us, the poor, the immigrants, the ones without a voice, it didn't feel like release. It felt like someone reminding us we didn't belong. You don't forget that. Not ever." The audience hushed, the tension sharp enough to cut. For the first time, Ricky didn't immediately answer. His usual smirk faltered. He leaned back in his chair, lips pressed together, eyes darting to the audience. For a moment, it looked like her story had touched him. But then, quietly, he said, "I grew up with nothing too. Council house, no money, no connections. Kids took the mick out of me every day. But you know what? Those jokes didn't break me. They made me tougher. They made me fight back. And now, I make the jokes, because if I can laugh at myself, nobody else can own me." There was a ripple of applause, though not as strong as before. Some people were nodding, others crossing their arms. The room was split right down the middle. Joy leaned forward, her eyes locked on Ricky. Her voice dropped lower, almost trembling with conviction. "You survived it, Ricky. Good for you. But not everyone comes out stronger. Some people don't get tougher, they get broken. And when you stand on that stage, making millions, and you punch down on them, you remind them of every insult they couldn't shake. That's not liberation. That's salt in the wound." The audience gasped, some clapping, others booing softly, caught in the swirl of emotion. Ricky rubbed his face with his hand, exhaling sharply, and then leaned forward, his grin returning, but edged with frustration. "So what do you want, Joy? A world where nobody ever feels offended? Or jokes are focus tested by a panel of experts to make sure no one, anywhere, might frown? That's not comedy. That's propaganda with a laugh track." The crowd erupted into divided cheers and groans, the tension snapping like static. Joy shot back immediately, her voice rising now. "No, Ricky, I want a world where people recognize that words matter, where comics are smart enough to punch up, not down, where we use laughter to build bridges, not burn them." The audience clapped, louder this time, lean and indoor. Ricky's eyes narrowed, but there was no malice, only intensity. Comedy isn't about building bridges. It's about telling the truth, even if it makes people squirm. And if people don't like it, fine, don't laugh. Change the channel, but don't tell me I can't say it. A man in the audience shouted, "Tell it, Ricky!" drawing a burst of laughter and applause. Others booed, shaking their heads. The studio felt less like a talk show and more like a stadium, two crowds battling for dominance. Whoopi finally raised her hands. Okay, everybody breathe. We're not here to start a civil war." But even she knew the dam had already cracked. Joy's face softened again, but her voice carried the weight of a lifetime. "I don't want to silence you. I just want you to see the people you hurt. The kid at home who doesn't laugh, who just feels smaller because of your joke. You can say you don't care, but don't pretend they don't exist." For a long moment, Ricky said nothing. His smile faded. He looked down at the table, then up at the audience. His voice was quieter when he finally spoke. "They do exist, and maybe I should think about that more. But I also know this. Laughter saved my life. If I didn't laugh at the things that hurt me, I don't think I'd be here. And I'd rather risk offending the world than give up the one thing that kept me alive." The audience froze, torn between empathy and unease. It was raw, it was vulnerable, and it was messy. The kind of moment that would go viral before the show even ended. The studio was no longer balanced between laughter and debate. It was a pressure cooker ready to blow. The air vibrated with unease, and every small word, every twitch of a hand felt amplified under the hot lights. Joy leaned back in her chair, folding her arms tightly across her chest. Her eyes were sharp, unwavering. "You call it survival, Ricky. I call it selfishness. You survived, but at whose expense? Every laugh you get off someone else's pain is a reminder that you've built your freedom on their backs." The audience reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs, scattered applause. A woman in the front row shook her head as if Joy had gone too far, while another clapped with fierce approval. The divide was glaring now. Ricky's head snapped up, and for the first time, his smirk disappeared completely. His voice cut like glass. "Don't you dare say I built my life on anyone else's back. I worked for every bit of this. I wrote the jokes. I stood on the stage. I got booed. I bombed. I clawed my way here. If people laughed, it's because they saw the truth in what I said. Don't twist it into some story where I'm the villain feeding on misery." The audience erupted, some cheering, some shouting, "That's right," while others booed louder than before. Joy leaned forward, her voice sharp but trembling slightly. "Truth without compassion isn't truth. It's cruelty. And you dress it up as bravery because it sells. You profit off wounds you've never even felt." That last line landed like a punch. Ricky slammed his palm on the table, the sound echoing through the studio. The crowd jumped in shock, some gasping audibly. He pointed toward her, his eyes blazing. "Don't you tell me what wounds I've felt. Don't you dare. You sit there with your platform, with your safety net, telling me I've never known pain. I buried my brother. I held my mom's hand as she died in a hospital bed we could barely afford. I know pain better than you think, and I laugh because it's the only thing that stops me from screaming." The audience went silent. The weight of his words hit like a thunderclap. Some clapped gently, others sat frozen, unsure how to respond. Joy herself hesitated, her expression flickering between defiance and sympathy. But she pressed on, her voice quieter now.
then why would you want to inflict that kind of pain on anyone else? Ricky's jaw tightened, and his reply came like a growl. Because it's not pain I'm giving them, it's freedom. If you can laugh at it, it loses power. You keep treating people like they're fragile, Joy. I treat them like they're strong enough to take it. The audience split in two again, cheers and boos clashing in a deafening wave. Whoopi jumped in, her voice louder now, almost pleading. All right, enough. This isn't a boxing ring. But the fight had taken on a life of its own. Joy rose slightly from her seat, her hand gripping the edge of the table. Strong enough? Some people don't need strength lessons from a millionaire on TV. They need kindness. They need to know they matter. And every time you hide behind a punchline, you take that away from them. Ricky stood now too, towering over the table. His voice thundered. And every time you tell people they're victims, you chain them down. You make them weaker. You teach them to flinch instead of fight. That's not kindness. That's poison. The audience was on its feet, half cheering, half jeering. The studio sounded like a stadium. Producers off stage waved their hands desperately, but the clash was unstoppable. Joy's voice rose above the noise, cracking with intensity. No, Ricky. Poison is pretending cruelty is noble. Poison is laughing at the broken and calling it courage. You don't save people with your comedy. You save yourself, and that's all you care about. Ricky's face flushed, his eyes wild with anger and hurt. He leaned forward across the table, his voice dropping to a growl that somehow cut through the chaos. Do you think I don't care? You think I'm heartless? You don't know me at all. And maybe that's the problem with this whole conversation. You don't want to understand. You just want to condemn. The crowd roared, some chanting his name, others booing so loudly it was hard to hear. Whoopi finally stood up and threw up her hands. All right, that's it. We're taking a break. Her voice boomed across the chaos, but the audience was still buzzing, shouting, clapping, gasping. As the cameras cut and the lights dimmed, Ricky and Joy remained locked in their stare, neither blinking, neither backing down. The tension didn't fade with the cameras. It hung thick in the room, a battle that felt unfinished, a wound ripped wide open for millions to see. It was no longer just a clash of opinions. It was personal, primal, and unforgettable.
When the cameras cut to commercial, the studio didn't settle into its usual hum. The audience stayed on their feet, buzzing, arguing with each other like they just witnessed a heavyweight fight. Some clapped Ricky on the back verbally, shouting, "You're right, Ricky," while others muttered Joy's words under their breath. Truth without compassion isn't truth. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was a wound, open and raw, that everyone felt part of. Backstage, producers scrambled. Their headsets buzzed with words like clip, viral, and trending already. Even before the segment had ended, snippets of the clash were racing across social media. One clip showed Ricky slamming his palm on the table, his voice breaking as he mentioned his brother and his mother. Another highlighted Joy's piercing accusation. You save yourself and that's all you care about. Each one was being shared, dissected, memed, and argued over. By the time the show returned from break, the mood was electric. The panel tried to move on to the next topic, something lighthearted about celebrity fashion, but the weight of what had just happened hung over every word. Ricky sat back in his chair, arms folded, the smirk gone, replaced by something harder, more guarded. Joy sipped her water, her hands trembling just slightly, though she tried to hide it. The audience, though quieter, wasn't done either. A woman in the second row stood up during applause and shouted, "You're both right," before sitting down again. Nervous laughter followed, but it captured exactly what so many people felt, torn between two truths, two philosophies, each hitting close to home. As the episode wrapped, Whoopi gave the kind of closing remark that only happens when history is made on live TV. Today's conversation wasn't easy, and maybe it shouldn't be. Comedy, compassion, and truth, they're messy things, but at least we're talking about it. That line drew a standing ovation, though Ricky and Joy remained in their chairs, silent,
locked in thought. The camera zoomed in one last time on Ricky's face, then Joy's, then faded to black. Outside the studio, the debate raged harder than it had inside. On Twitter, hashtag Team Ricky and Team Joy trended side by side. Celebrities weighed in. Comedians defended Ricky, calling him brave for standing by comedy as an uncensored art. Activists praised Joy for standing firm on empathy, saying she'd given voice to the voiceless. Clips of the shouting match reached millions within hours, dominating feeds and news cycles. Even late-night hosts got in on it. Some joked that The View had turned into a pay-per-view fight. Others replayed Ricky's line, "Comedy that tiptoes around feelings isn't comedy, it's customer service," as both a punchline and a point of discussion. But beneath the noise, viewers across the country were having quieter conversations. Parents talked to their kids about bullying. Teachers brought up the clip in classrooms to debate free speech and empathy. Families argued at dinner tables about where the line in comedy should be drawn. It wasn't just a talk show moment anymore. It was a cultural flashpoint. And Ricky? He left the studio with his jaw set, refusing to speak to reporters outside, though flashes of cameras followed him to his car. Later, he posted a single tweet. "Laughter saved my life. It'll save others too, even if it offends some along the way." It racked up hundreds of thousands of likes and just as many angry replies. Joy, meanwhile, took a different approach. She went live on Instagram that evening, looking directly into her phone camera. Her message was calm, almost weary. "If standing up for compassion makes me the villain, so be it. I'll never apologize for believing words can heal instead of harm." Her followers flooded the comments with hearts, clapping emojis, and long paragraphs of support. In the end, no one won. Ricky's fans saw him as the last defender of raw, fearless comedy. Joy supporters saw her as the voice of decency in a world that often laughed at the vulnerable. The clash didn't settle the debate. It ignited it. And maybe that was the point, because comedy, compassion, and truth had been put under the harshest lights of all, daytime television, live and unfiltered. And millions of people walked away not with answers, but with questions they couldn't ignore. If you enjoyed this powerful moment, make sure to subscribe for more celebrity clashes, emotional showdowns, and unforgettable TV moments. Drop a comment below. Should comedy ever be censored, or should laughter always come without limits?